Hello, and welcome to the Professor Podcast with Ruth and Claire. Each episode, we talk about a particular topic in the life of a professor. We are tenure-track faculty members in the sciences, working at a primarily undergraduate university in California. The purpose of our podcast is reflection, so we bring something we think is working and something we're working on to discuss. Welcome to the Professor Podcast with Ruth and Claire. I'm Claire.
And I'm Ruth. And today we're going to talk about gumption. But before we do that, Claire, how was your week?
My week was good. Ralph and I just started a new hobby of trail running. And we just did our first run through the trails today, which was good. It was fun. Fun to be out in the trails. And we were going a little bit longer than usual, so we went a little bit slower than usual, which was pleasant.
Nice.
So, yeah, it was nice.
Very cool. I think especially we have been having some issues where we live with air quality. And now that it's so good, it does feel like, we should be out frolicking for sure. So
it's so nice to breathe good quality air.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. No, we are very, very luxurious with what we normally have.
Totally.
And so it was, yeah. Awesome.
How was your week?
My week was good, and I don't want to hex myself, but
Not that good.
Yeah, exactly. I've had somewhat of a turning point a little bit in the class.
Ooh.
Which I think normally happens anyway after the first midterm, where they're suddenly like, oh, first of all, I do need to actually ask for help. Second of all, this person isn't out to get me. And then I actually made an assignment for them to go to office hours or to the tutors. And
Cool.
so like do that.
Just for everybody.
Right. And so they just, and you get extra credit if you do both. And, just to kind of get over that activation barrier of engaging in some way with somebody and asking for help. So
That's
actually
cool.
and it's like totally artificial because they're coming for credit, but I had a much bigger attendance at my office hours this week. And hopefully, I guess the idea is they'll come because they have to, and then they'll find out it wasn't terrible, and then they'll come back. So that's my plan.
Are you requiring them to do anything once they arrive, or can they just come hang out, or how does the assignment work?
I said they can come hang out. They need to stay for at least 10 or 15 minutes.
Okay.
And yeah, that's it.
That's cool. I like that.
Yeah.
And if there's a bunch of people, then you'll be chatting about some problems anyway, and someone just
Yeah,
hangs out
totally.
for
And
15 minutes. Be good, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So hopefully. But I think even not necessarily just because of the assignment, but like I have them do quizzes for lectures and stuff. And I think the first week ever, I had almost full participation in that. So
Nice.
it kind of, there's just like a slight turning point. It can feel the energy shifting a little bit where at the beginning, it just feels like, especially with this class, because it's the first physics class, you have to do so much kind of convincing them to get on board. And hopefully, somehow after the first midterm, it kind of, they're starting to believe that this is necessary work. And some of them are maybe beginning to believe that they don't actually have all the answers and they do need to engage. And other people are beginning to believe that maybe if they get a bit of help, they actually could do well. And so, yeah, hopefully will continue. But
Nice. Yeah.
it's like every semester I forget this happens and I'm like, no, this semester it's just terrible. Nothing is going well. And then, yeah, so we're getting there.
You know what I sometimes do is put little calendar reminders to myself. Like if you did it for next year at, whatever time, so that you remember it's normal. Like sometimes I put reminders before the first assignment to like be prepared for tons of excuses for the first assignment being late.
Oh my God,
Or,
that's so cool.
Yeah, which is really nice because then if it's the day before the first assignment's due, one year I said, okay, now remember to get paper and ink for your printers and stuff like that and I really got a lot fewer excuses about papers and ink and printers because I reminded them, I think. So
Yeah.
I don't know if it was probably some combination of the reminder being helpful and them not wanting to have the excuse that I had suggested they avoid. But regardless, there were fewer excuses and I was prepared for it because I knew it was coming. So anyway, just a fun
Yeah, I
thing.
want to send myself notes like, okay, you're in week 5 and it really seems like this semester is never going to recover from how to, but don't worry, it probably will be okay. Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
Notes to your future self.
Yeah. And you could just put them in the calendar or something at the, same time next year whenever you need to know
Wow.
it. Yeah.
Wow, that's kind of revolutionary. Okay, I love that. That's cool.
So anyway.
So do you have your quote for us this week?
Yes, I do. And it's from this guy, Joseph Dietsch. I don't know how to pronounce his last name. But he wrote this awesome book called Elevate that I've really been enjoying. And here's a quote from it. "Fascination is much more enjoyable than frustration, and it's far more productive. By attempting to sincerely understand something, we become open and curious, which is a great starting point for learning and growth."
Whoa.
And just in the context, I mean, this is true in all contexts. Of course, in teaching, it's really easy to get frustrated about things. But if we instead try to figure out why it's not working more curiously, I think he's right, that we'll be able to actually be more likely to be able to solve the problem, you know?
And I think I have much more invitations to do that this semester than I have in a long time. Because I think, there's so many things where like students are complaining about things and I feel so maxed out and frustrated. I'm like, why are you, instead
Just
of like,
look at the
okay,
syllabus or whatever. Yeah.
right. But instead of just like, okay, what can I do? And I think, not only are they maybe getting into the groove of the semester, but I'm feeling a little less insane. And then those first few weeks were very intense. So
Totally. Yeah.
I love that. So do you want to tell us a bit about what we mean by gumption?
Yeah, so Gumption, I guess we kind of had a longer title and we just shortened it to Gumption for short. So Gumption, to admit that anyone can learn what we know, is kind of the broader context of what we're thinking, and just having the confidence to do the things that are the way we want to do them in the classroom is what I'm thinking about with Gumption.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not easy.
It's not easy, but
No.
but it's good to have Gumption.
Yeah.
So what's working for you with Gumption in the classroom?
I think when I can embody that and can have the courage of my own convictions, it really works.
Okay.
Well, and I think when I really am like, yep, this is the way we're doing it and that's what's happening, like that can really work. I think also just like the kind of longer title of admitting that anyone can do what we do, that really impacts some students. And like even last week, I think I shared something like, yeah, I failed my first physics test. And like there was like an intake of breath from a couple of students who were like, whoa, like, wow, and that kind of really can have a big impact, a positive impact on students.
Mm-hmm. So then they know that they can do it too. It's not
right, and it's not. Yeah, and it doesn't. You don't have to be completely perfect the whole time. To actually get to be successful or to keep with what it is you're interested in. And I think that vulnerability to do that really fosters connections.
Totally.
With students. And if you're kind of creating a persona of, no, I was always perfect, it's never been a problem, like that is really, really difficult for anyone to connect with.
Totally.
That kind of person. So I think that, and then it really does embody the growth mindset idea. That, anybody can do this and get there. And so, I think it's really crucial if you're trying to, I sometimes feel like I have a fixed mindset about myself and then a growth mindset for my students. But like, to try and get there and really embody that growth mindset would be good.
Totally. I also feel like it's harder for me to have a growth mindset about myself.
I know. Well, we also, we came up in a different time, right? When I felt like when I was growing up, there genuinely was a lot more, well, you either have it or you don't. Like that was much more of the kind of vibe. And so
different language. Interesting.
Yeah. So what about you? What's working well for you?
So I think it takes confidence to do things. Well, confidence and gumption are kind of similar. So, but I'm getting more confident with experience teaching.
Yes.
And that leads to the ability to do things the way I want to do them in the classroom with more confidence and gumption.
Yes.
So, an example is when people ask questions that I don't know the answer to, I'm much more comfortable just from time of saying that I don't know. And I think admitting that I don't know everything while being in front of the class is good for relatability and it seeming achievable to learn things and whatnot. Also, I've learned this cool thing. going from I don't know the answer to this question to, oh, but wait, I actually do know some things related to that answer that would be helpful. That's really, most of the time, I actually do know something related to that question that would be worth sharing. So my first reaction is I don't know the answer to that specific question, but now I'm getting faster and faster just with time practicing it, getting to, but here's some context that I can tell you that actually, most of the time, it ends up seemingly satisfying the curiosity or leading the student in the right direction of finding the right answer, and much more productive than just saying, I don't know. So those are some examples.
Dude, you actually mentioned that before in a previous episode, and it really resonated with me because like I remember the first time someone asked me something and I didn't know the answer, and just like pouring sweat and feeling like I was gonna barf. Like it was so stressful. And I think, there's a real gear shift between up to a certain point in our career, we are always junior to somebody else, and you're being asked a question in an examination kind of way. It's not oh, how did you make that? Like it's more, and what did you put in? And I'm expecting you to not know, like it was from an examination point of view. And you're right. Like students are very rarely sitting there going, I have the correct answer. I know it. And I want to see if you know it.
No,
but like,
they just want
feels
more
like that's
information.
Totally. And like you said, there's been times where I'm like, I'm not actually an expert in ballistic, whatever, blah, blah, blah. But then I can be like, oh, it accelerates at 9.8. And they're like, whoa. And you're like, oh, okay.
Because you probably do know more than they do about the context of the question they're asking, and so the information that you have is actually going to be really helpful if you provide it. And probably, like a lot of the times when I think I don't know, it's because I know enough to know how much there is that I don't know. But I did know a lot related to it that I can actually give the information. So anyway, that's all some successful gumption things that get more easy to do with experience.
Yeah, big time.
Yeah.
But and true. And then I don't feel like, again, with time, it doesn't feel like, oh, this one person is examining me and I'm going to fail this test. And then, like, it's like, oh, yeah, I don't know about that, but I'll come back to you. Or, and it doesn't feel like the end of the world. But yeah.
Yeah. I do have to admit, I feel like I've kind of oscillated, At first, I would never say anything that I was not 100% sure on, and then I started saying a few things that I was pretty confident on, and then at one point I said something that was wrong, and I was like, oh, okay, I went too far, So I'm sure you got to find a balance in there.
I like Claire just suddenly turns into someone who's just like making stuff up about everything. You're like, you went too far down the track.
Yeah, exactly. So
anyway. Yeah, but you're right though. We always like, especially in the scale of what the students want to know, we have something to say about most things.
Exactly.
I just don't have like 5 prepared examples ready to work on the board about it. So
totally.
Yeah.
So what are you working on with Gumption?
I think one thing too, though, is it's something I think I talk about a lot on here that I really struggle with is like people's perception of me. And I think I really do think it's really important to sort of have that vulnerability and expose certain facets of yourself. Like, yeah, of course, I didn't know this when I was, and I failed my first physics test, or, I'm not sure about this, or, just that kind of stuff. But then for some students that does discredit you with them, and so it's just this kind of balance between and then I think that is some of the gumption of getting okay with that. Being like, okay, well, you're kind of growing up, like all these students are still in the same soup that we're all in, where it's like, oh, like unless you're very serious and, I don't know. I someday we should have an episode about gender, because I think there is a particular thing about women where I was thinking lately where like if I came in as a total hard ass and was like, this is how it is, and ran my class like a boot camp, like people would riot, but then if you're too soft the other way, you can kind of get trodden on, and where's this line you can find between the two? And it's a little bit like that with this, where it's like, where's the line of, yes, kind of being happy to share some of your kind of struggles or whatever without that giving people ammunition to totally discredit you.
Sure.
But then I guess is the end point just getting comfortable with some people are going to not be into what you're talking about no matter what.
Well, yeah, I mean, we can take some advice from Dumbledore.
Yes.
That it's we're not going to get everybody liking us.
Totally.
So there's totally that. And I agree with you. I mean, yeah, it's helpful, I believe, to tell the students to show that we don't know everything, even in this field that we're teaching. Of course, but to show that, and that we have, failed the first physics test or something, which doesn't really discredit how much physics you know right now, but
Right.
But at the same time, we don't want to minimize all the stuff that we have done and learned that gets us in a position where we can teach them this class. So we don't want to minimize that. And we are still in a position to be teaching them this class, which is great. So it is totally a balance to have the confidence for both.
And I have it here on my list too, like authority, like having, like, because sometimes I'm like, yeah, like we're collaborating to learn stuff, but then ultimately, like, but actually I'm in charge and my opinions have more weight than yours.
But actually, so you're wrong. That's not how you do the problem.
Right. It's like, yeah, it's not actually an option because I'm going to give you a grade for this, so you should draw a diagram because I said you should. But so it's kind of hard sometimes and one time I had a class, the Dementor kids, and I sort of got driven to actually saying, hey, like, I have fully established myself in the world of physics to be, in this position to teach, and you kind of have to respect that at some point. Whatever way I did it, it just, none of it didn't have that authenticity because it's like I didn't believe it when I was saying it.
Sure.
And so
you didn't say it with enough gumption.
I didn't have enough gumption for sure. But just that kind of weight of, I absolutely know. I don't know. I can't even totally articulate what I mean. But so yeah, I think I struggle with anytime I've tried to be authoritarian and I'm the expert, it just doesn't work anyway. Right. So it's not even an option because I can't do that kind of authentically. But it's tricky. It's tricky sometimes because sometimes, like, I see you can really impact students by sharing, that you aren't the the total perfect expert, like you have flaws and failed things, but sometimes that invites people to come in with stuff where you're like, actually, not you though, I don't want you to have this opinion, I want you to see me as an expert and stop chiming in, or I don't know.
That's interesting. So it relates to what I'm working on too. So can I share that?
Oh yes, please. Yeah.
So I bet many people teaching in a field that involves problem solving have run into the response from students, it looks so easy when you do it. Have you run into this?
Oh, yeah.
Totally. So I'm working on how to respond to that statement with gumption. So I think first, accepting the compliment, that's nice of them to say. That's a polite thing to respond. And then also convey somehow, I know that you can do it too, It looks easy when I do it because I've done this type of problem 1,000,000 times. You can also do this type of problem a bunch and get really good at solving it, and it will be very easy for you too. So I want it to be clear that they can learn what I know, and that's the point of the class, for them to learn this topic that I happen to know that I'm teaching them. And so an area that I've thought about with this is sometimes hearing from students that some particular professor is brilliant, and I've heard a few students say somebody's brilliant and they don't understand what the professor teaches. Like, they're not able to follow it.
I've heard that so often, and it's kind of like sometimes I had a conversation with the student and they were like, oh, so-and-so, like, yeah, I don't really know what's going on, but it's just they're so smart. And like the kind of flip of that is, I understood what you were talking about because you're kind of not, so like you're like, yeah, like, is that a backhanded compliment?
Right.
But it's also disheartening that people interpret maybe less effective teaching as someone just being, and I think it's a real trope in physics for sure, just that kind of absent-minded professor whose mind is too busy on their like award-winning Nobel Prize research, they can't dumb it down to people or whatever, which is, I fully reject that notion.
Sure, because, I mean, brilliance should be shining light on the information for us to understand. Yes, what a lovely way to put that. And the other thing is that the students feeling that way, at least some of them, if they think that you need to be brilliant to understand it, and they don't think of themselves as brilliant, then they're going to think they can't understand it. So, yeah, that conveying, you can do it too. Especially, I think it's very good on the one-on-one situations where it's like, you hear some things like, oh man, it looks so easy when you do it, or I understand it when I'm watching you, or something like that. Is like, it's really just because I've done it a ton of time. Like, I've spent a lot of time with this content. I've written tons of problems, and I rewrote this particular problem 5 times to get the math to work.
Yeah.
So I know this problem. Like, that's why it's so easy. It's not, that's why. That's the answer. So you can do it too. And I can help you learn how to do it. So yeah, I'm working on trying to convey my confidence that they can learn it by practicing it, just like I learned it by practicing it,
Right, and I think, that's what I say too in that situation. Is like, just wait till you've been doing this for 100 years,
Oh, that's
and then
good
you will
phrasing.
also
I like that.
and that kind of thing. But it is, and because I think, and it's really interesting, kind of reading a lot of like parenting literature and like thinking about how to talk to little kids about learning, and they really are finding that sort of rewarding brilliance is really anxiety inducing and not helpful, but
Right.
kind of portraying a picture to children of like, yeah, it's just effort. Like, it's just how many times you try the math problem, or,
Sure.
that kind of stuff is really beneficial. And you can see it with the students.
Yeah.
And there was a really interesting paper. I cannot remember the details of who wrote it, but it was studying the participation of women and people of color in disciplines related to how much the discipline valued brilliance.
Oh,
and
interesting.
physics had a really high rating of them valuing just innate brilliance, and a really low participation of women and people of color. And it was just really interesting. Like, I think we were the worst. Physics and computer science were like some of the worst. But it was just, that notion of brilliance is so toxic.
Yeah, because then, and I think I've read places with those studies, if you've been told, oh, you're so good at this, and then you don't want, then that doesn't motivate you to try something harder, because that will
You don't want to lose
prove that you're actually
that
not good
label.
at it, instead of, totally.
Yeah. And it is, and it's like, I think from what you're saying and then hearing what I'm saying, like, we know it's super, super important to do these things, but it is scary at certain points in your career too, to sort of put yourself out there and admit those things.
Totally. So yeah, and I do think, like we were saying earlier, it's got to be a balance, because you don't want to just say, anyone can learn this. You definitely don't want to say it's super easy. It's not easy. You have to put in the effort and the time.
Well, and I think students don't like that either. Like, being told that something's super easy and they're clearly not finding it easy.
That's totally demotivating. Yeah. So it can't be, and it's not that it's super easy, and it's not that it requires brilliance. And so neither of those are true, and neither of those are motivating. It's the middle one that's true and hopefully motivating. That's, you can do it. You just need to put in the effort, and we're here to help direct that effort and time.
Yeah, perfect.
So, yeah. Gumption, I guess, just my thoughts on gumption is, the gumption to teach the way I want to teach takes some courage to demand that we're going to do it the way that I think we should do it, and to show that I don't actually know everything despite being in front of the classroom. So those are kind of my summary.
And it's actually interesting, I think, for me, I felt like I had come a long way in terms of like hearing, oh, but Professor so-and-so does it this way, and me being like, well, this is the way we're doing it in my class. But that has gotten actually worse with this transition to online teaching, because I feel kind of much more insecure.
Sure.
Because it's the first semester. So when I hear, oh, you don't do this, but so-and-so does, and you're like, oh no, so-and-so does what? What do they do? And should I do
so-and-so
it?
do? Yeah, totally.
I know, so yeah.
And again, that's a balance too, because ideally we would be very confident in the way we're doing it, but open to hearing the other ways and wanting to
because there's
improve.
a downside to that too, if you're just like, nope, this is fine.
No, we don't want to be closed-minded. We want to know that we have limitations with the way that we're doing it, and so be open to hearing new ones, but in the moment, be confident that this is the way we're doing it for XYZ reasons.
Yeah. Tricky.
So anyway, lots of balances today.
Tricky. Well, and it's kind of like maybe the message we're giving the students is, say, just that idea of with time, and maybe that's true for us too, because I've certainly noticed that in normal teaching, with time, my gumption is getting better and better.
Totally.
Or is stronger, I don't know. But yes, and then I can feel the wobble now of doing something so new with the online teaching.
Totally. And of course, we have less experience, so we have less solid ground of feeling like, yes, definitely this is the way I want to do it.
Yeah.
So.
And there's less collective experience too, because it's even...
That's true.
Yeah. Tricky. Okay, good. I like it, Claire.
I like it too.
Okay.
Well, thanks for this chat.
Thank you. Thanks so much for joining us on the Professor Podcast with Ruth and Claire. We're delighted to have you as a listener, and we would love to hear from you. And if you want to email us, our address is contactprofessorpodcast@gmail.com. We'd love to hear any of your suggestions for future shows or professor quotes that you might want to share with us, or even just things that have come up for you when you were listening to previous episodes. And if you've been enjoying the podcast, we would love if you would spread the word. So the best way to spread word is by telling people you know if you think they should listen to it, or you can leave us a review wherever you listen to your podcasts. Thanks so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time.